This is the 19th season of Bass Talk Live. BTL is presented by Bass Cat Boats, Strike King Lures, Aftco, Pro Guide Batteries, X-Zone Lures, Shoreline Boat and RV Repair, Spro, Gamakatsu, Big Bite Baits, The Bass Tank, Denali Rods, Beatdown Outdoors, and Sunline.
BTL coming at you.
Good morning, and welcome to another exciting edition of BTL Bass Talk Live, where we are going to talk about bass fishing. Exciting show today. We have him on 2-3 times a year. Rick Pierce from Bass Cat Boats will join, and I think he has some interesting perspectives, not only on bass boats and the current bass boat market, but also professional fishing as a whole. I'm looking at him behind stage right there, and the man has not only built bass boats for the better part of half a century, but he's also caught a few fish out of a bass boat and has been through some changes and lived through and seen and sponsored and talked to guys who have gone back and forth and changed and format changes. Well, that's what we're dealing with now. Before we get to Rick, a couple things went down over the weekend. Kind of expected this one. Classic champ David Fritz retired. Legendary career for David Fritz. Obviously known for, well, we'll ask Rick. We'll bring Rick in for this too. I wasn't going to bring him in for this already, but we'll bring Rick in for this. Rick, even though David Fritz forever fished against him, friends with him, all that, not a surprise in my opinion that Fritz hung it up, but man, the guy has caught some fish chucking and winding, hasn't he?
Yeah, David's quite an angler. I mean, I was fished against him. One of the best ones was Bugs Island. You watch him come down the middle of the creek, fishing individual stumps he saw on his at the time his flashers, you know, and sitting on that seat coming down through there in an invitational event and catching fish. But David, I've known him for years, knowing him going back to being sponsored by Hubert and Rose Green. That's where I first met him at, back before he became a pro angler. And he really jumped out with his Redman career and did well. And we managed to eat breakfast at the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame here about 2 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
Had a good morning, he and I, and my wife and his girlfriend. We all sat and ate together. And so spent some time with David. It's good to do.
Now, did David make that lamp that was auctioned off at the Hall of Fame? It was like a one-of-a-kind lamp with like a shade, and I believe the base of the lamp was like an old cranking stick that he like fished with in the Classic. Yeah. Was that right?
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he did make that lamp. It was very special. He's going to make a few more of them, but going to try to do something special with them. David's just a unique guy, kind of got his own thing going on. Loves that Carolina barbecue. I like the more Arkansas style barbecue. He likes that Carolina style. So, you know, and you can tell looking at him, he likes barbecue, you know, but
now one is mustard based. Is one mustard based and one is ketchup based on the barbecue? Well, is that the difference?
Well, there's more to it than that. It's the way they cook it, and just there's a whole lot to Carolina barbecue.
I've had it out there. In the article announcing Fritz's retirement, he said, "I'd like to think my work has helped a lot of fishermen." He said, "The younger generation probably knows me more for the Fritz side than they do anything else, and that's fine by me." That bait will litter. Oh yeah, he's still plugging the Fritz side there. That's a smooth move. At the end, he said, "The picture of the lock screen on my phone is me and Ray Scott when I won a BASS tournament at Bugs Island." Great transition there, Rick. Ray did so much for me and promoted all the fishermen in a way we had never been promoted. Dave Mercer is great too. I can't say enough about bass. They made my career for sure. So it looks as though David Fritz has made his last cast on the Elite Series. I actually got to fish. It wasn't his choice. It was a media event, Rick, but it was on Sam Rayburn, and I got paired with him for one of those, and we went out for 2.5 hours, and I was shooting content. And at the end, the last hour, I got to crank offshore structure on Sam Rayburn with David Fritz. And it is a top 5 moment in the 15 years that I've involved in this industry. That was when he was experimenting. I don't know if he still does it, but he had just started cranking with straight braid and was he had just started that year and was kind of telling me about all the benefits of it. And boy, he caught probably 5 or 6, just little ones, with the leg touching the inside of the rod, that slow gear ratio reel, grinding that big plug on Rayburn, but definitely a memory that I'll always take with me.
Yeah, that memory at Bugs Island was actually, he was coming down the middle of the creek, and I had caught fish on the same creek, and we were fishing the same creek, and my fish weren't producing. Well, I didn't know they were all out there on those stumps, and David knew that. He was just really good at where they transitioned. And Bugs is a little different lake anyway, as you probably know. You've been there, I think. Yep. But it's a different lake, and it's kind of sand, dirt type lake, and sloping transition with defined channels. And so definitely it's a rock type structure, but not really. And David did a real good job on those isolated stumps. That was what he really honed in on at Bugs all the time.
We're going to get into the technology, and I find this fascinating because you said he found those stumps idling with his flasher, right?
That's all about any of us used back then.
But he could find a stump with his flasher. I mean, a stump that's this big around, he would watch his flasher enough and be like, okay, there's a stump.
Well, as much as anything, David felt them too. You could feel them if you fish them, Mm-hmm. And I've got spots on North Fork. I've got one bank, Matt, that's got one stump on it, and it's literally one stump. And right now it's probably in about 11 foot of water where the lake's at right now. And, most people just go down that bank, and I go to one stump. And David was really good at that.
This is a great kind of juxtaposition from old school to new school. So, like you mentioned, I fished the Bugs Island Open last year, and I ended up catching it. I was proud of myself. I ended up changing my pattern, catching them on a 3/4 ounce spinnerbait on wind-blown banks. But in practice, I figured out the stump deal. Well, I was able to go on Google Earth, put a drop when the lake was down on all these stumps on these kind of gravel rock clayish points, then transfer that waypoint to my graph, then drive directly to the graph, to the waypoint, drop my trolling motor, and know that on this point there's 6 stumps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Here they are. Then target them with a drop shot or a plug on my forward-facing sonar, and just go point to point to point. Never been there before. Had 100 stumps based on my Google Earth research and forward-facing sonar. It's crazy how much time has changed from a guy who's feeling it with a plug, crawling around the bottom and on a flasher, to doing a bunch of research on a couple computer screens and then driving right to the dang stump.
Yeah, we're slow, Matt, to technology that's out there, and we're slow to adapt to it and slow to accept it. I go back a long way, and we've done, you go back to the bottom line technology and all the side scan stuff years ago. That stuff was there then, and several of us have run sonar on the side of our trolling motors. I mean, I've run pucks on the side, run 2 pucks on one on an AB switch. Back in the 90s, we had M810 micronars, and an M810 micronar was revolutionary, and nobody accepted it, and we just didn't change. And so it's become, I think the dominance today is the quality of units we have and how much anybody can run them, and they don't take a lot of education to do so. I mean, yeah, you got to learn to set your units up, and you got to have clean pictures and all that. Mm-hmm. But other than that, it's pretty simple,
I have no idea what a MA10 Macamar is.
Micronar, yeah. That original side imaging, it gave you a 90-degree picture of the bottom.
What year was this?
That's in 1991.
And how many people used it?
I think I was about the only one. Nobody really adopted to it. It was an old Hondex type unit, It was made by the same people who made Hondex.
Okay, I'm not picturing it. You said so. It was side imaging in 91, basically, or down imaging in 91.
It was side imaging. It was basically It was almost like a radar in a submarine. You'd picture what it looks like when you look at a submarine radar or a ship's radar, and it flashed back and forth left to right 90 degrees. It actually had a transducer that moved 90 degrees and motorized. It was a kerosene filled transducer, and you mounted on your trolling motor, and transducer scanned like this.
So just like we have the forward facing sonar transducer mounted on either a turret or the trolling motor head, and you're panning it, they're like, hey, we could create something that pans by itself, similar to what 360 is doing, I guess.
Yeah, it's really very similar to 360. It's more kind of a cross between them all, because you could go down a creek channel where there was a defined creek channel, one of the best places I used it was Table Rock one time, and I could go down that creek channel, and there's a 5-foot drop, and I had a picture of it, you know.
Quick note, people are talking about flashers on the, if you guys want to learn like what a fish looks like coming into a flasher bottom, you can go, one of the best ways, and I learned a couple years ago on a Vexlar. You ever heard of a Vexlar, Rick? Ice fishing.
Good unit. Yeah.
And all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, I can watch my bait, watch the Crappie Chronicles YouTube stuff, and they have great screens of crappie coming into Vexlars, and they'll get super jacked up. They'll be like, oh my gosh, there's one fly into it, and it'll be this little bloop that's just going bloop, 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 bloop up close to it. And it's real easy to understand the flasher once then. I also had Fritz show me how to use the flasher. I still didn't understand it. But I was like, hey, can we go do some flasher graphing? And he's like, well, yeah. And he'd be like, see that high bottom? I'm like, no, David, it just looks the exact same to me. And he's like, but there's a hard spot there. So,
hey, I still got two 2330Cs on the shelf. One's right up there.
Oh, yeah, I see it.
Yeah, 2330C on the shelf. And that to me is the finest unit for now. Vexlar's a good unit, no doubt. But I think 2330C had the best separation, best target. You had a 30, 60, and 300 foot scale. You know where I live, Matt, and Bull Shoals in September, October used to be known for spoon fishing, and we spoon fish up to 80 foot deep. And it was quite a unit, you know. It's just, of course, shad become trees. You look at shad or become trees on an LCR, but you can certainly pick out to target the fish. You know?
Dale, well, that's probably not his real name, Dale, but he pointed out that cats came standard with a flasher well into the 2000s. Do you remember the first model of Bass Cat that you went, you know what, we're not putting a flasher in this? Or the first model that had a flasher?
Gosh, we did flashers until 03. We still did flashers in 03, so I don't know. I mean, it would come later. I don't know exactly. There's an archive on it. But with the console change of 2012, I think.
So you guys had flashers built in like well past when I would say the average angler was no longer using a flasher. Yeah,
you know, you look at there were a couple other units. There was an LCD unit made that was really good Zircon, 30-40 units, and the little RT85 was a really slick unit. And it was real-time sonar. Then you had the 1240As, and they changed and dropped the 1240A, which is a dual scale, a 40-foot scale. But with real-time sonar, you could have bottom up to about 60, 65 mile an hour if you kept your boat trimmed down. And so you saw the bottom right now. So if you're running a creek or something, there's no delay. And, of course, today we're dependent on processor speed, how fast is the unit. And, I mean, you look at the difference in, for example, on some brands, those smaller units are slower processors, so the unit's losing. Well, you know, you're covering at 60 mile an hour, you're covering some ground. You're covering in a second. You're covering about 2/3 of a football field or so a second.
Yeah, you can find some stuff on a big fishery that way if you know what you're looking at.
Well, you know, you're able to move. You can not only find stuff, but if you're going to run a creek, and we didn't have mapping then, Matt. Yeah. That's what everybody forgets. You studied your map. You didn't have GPS. GPS didn't come about until later. I mean, I ran back in the 90s. I ran Loran units when we went north. I ran Loran units until really even with the GPS changes up until the mid 2000s when we got GPS. And like when you go to Potomac, the military would shut off the GPS. So we really didn't have good GPS. It was all out of cattywampus. It wasn't working properly.
What do you mean the military? What do you mean?
You get up to Potomac because we're close to DC. The military would shut down the GPS signals.
Like scramble the GPS signal on your boat?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Really?
They scrambled the signal from the satellites so you know basically somebody couldn't target something. Today they don't do that, but in the 2000s they did that, and so you would think you were on something, you'd be off 100 yards, you know.
While we're talking about electronics, I do want to talk about the graphs on the front of the boats. I feel like it's a natural segue. So I mentioned this about 5 minutes before we went live, and we weren't able to actually kind of actualize that conversation. So we'll just have it live now. But if you've been following any of the social media and stuff, you know, Bass has I guess, created a council to to assess the impact of forward-facing sonar. And I don't want to have, if you want to have that conversation, we can. But I want to focus on the number of graphs on the front. We've seen double stacks and triple stacks. I believe this year we're going to see our first quad box on the front of a bass boat with 4 12-inch units. Elite Series rookie Kyle Patrick kind of trolled that he was going to put 6 units up front, and he had 4 stacked like this and 2 on the side. I think that might have been just a little bit of a troll there, but we're talking 3, 4, 5, and 6 transducers off power poles and turrets and all sorts of crazy stuff. My question to you is, well, I know the answer because you said it was Ike, but do you remember the first guy who was like, hey, I want to put 2 graphs up on the front deck of this boat?
Yeah, well, the answer is Ike, and it was back in the 2007 era. And it was his first year with us, or second year with us, and we ran dual graphs. And he went to one large graph, and we would mount a little 5-inch or 7-inch on the down low to the side on the ram. And it would run totally separate system. It was on a totally separate harness, and it was really done just for backup. And from that big main graph and 5-inch, within 2 years, they were all running 12-inch, 10-inch screens, and they were all running whatever was available at the time, and then running multiple graphs. Mike's system was just redundancy. Everything was turned off. He flipped a power switch, and he gave power to the units, and the units worked separate. They were just redundancy. We had a lot of problems back years ago with units breaking, units going down. Plug connections are still an issue on some brands. So plug connections to units that can come loose. And so Mike's theory was, and this is also not to Lowrance. This was during a real challenging era with Lowrance equipment, that they were having some issues, and there was just a little short period that they had some issues, but they gave Humminbird a real segue into the market, because when you're having a problem with one brand, the other brand gets more popular. Mm-hmm. But Mike did that really just to back up, because he'd had units go down, and then basically he flipped one switch and he had units front and rear.
So it had nothing to do with, hey, I want to run 2D on this and mapping on this one. That hadn't really, guys were just split screening at the time.
Yeah, they were split screening, and it really segued it into the market. And we're using the word segue a lot, but it really kind of used it to go into the market. And what happened is the guy started following what Mike was doing without realizing he really wasn't using them for that purpose. But then you started having, and of course, another thing people don't realize, that's about the time we got more accurate GPS signals. Mm-hmm. So we wound up getting better GPS in that era. I'll never forget when we did in 2003, we built the first dash that would handle a big screen. Like at the time, they only had a black and white unit. So I think it was an LCX 15. And then they came out with the LCX 16C at Lowrance. And gosh, I got a call from one of the sales managers at Lowrance one day. What are you doing with these GPSs? Well, we did that in 2003 model year with the Cougar FTD, and nobody could do an in-dash screen, and it wasn't real popular. Not a lot of people were doing GPS unless you were a pro. Now, the pros were all running GPS, and, of course, Kevin ran one and learned how to run it. He spent a lot of time with my dad. Dad and Kevin were real good friends when Dad was alive, so Kevin and Dad would go to lunch, go to supper, go do whatever, but they were good friends. But certainly, Kevin was running it. A few other guys were running it. Dad was running it. I was running it. But there were several people running it. But outside of the pro side, nobody had done anything with it. And so when we did that in 2003, I got this call from the sales director at Lowrance. What are you doing with all these GPS units? They actually didn't plan on building that many of them, and we were out selling them because just about every boat that went out of here had them. Huh. And that's just, you could get GPS. I mean, if you'll recall, they were the larger pucks. They'd just gone to the small puck. That puck was about that big. I mean, it was bigger than your large cell phone today in size and footprint. And that change probably helped us a little bit to get some space because it came out with the same size puck or receiver they have today, and then improved the quality of receivers tremendously. Mm-hmm.
Let me pull this picture up here because this will be kind of an interesting comparison. So that would have to be the 2011 Classic, I believe, Rick, because that was the only time that they put the they put the radar on the back of the boat. So
yeah, that's when we ran radar. They were running to Venice. Yeah.
Yeah, but so just
wagon wheel. Yeah.
Take that giant. That's a giant pug. That's a one-off in the back. But I'm looking at the front here, and I see the small. That's probably a 7-inch unit or a 5-inch unit, and a 10 right there on the side. But I remember when all this stuff happened, you had guys who were doing all sorts of funky stuff to fit these units up front. When it became kind of standard, and you can see it right there. So he's got one on the floor here, and then he's got one on the side here. But so he's literally has to be looking 90 degrees to the side to even see his graph. Was there like a meeting or anything that you guys had at Basscat when you were like, hey, we're in an era now where guys are wanting to put 24 inches of screen up on the front, and we need to start figuring out how this can work with our bass boats?
No, I was probably resistant to it, to be honest. It just was overkill. I mean, it was good for pro marketing. And pros, you know, most of your pros, they either got a VIP deal or they've got some type of a platform. Some get units, and some are sponsored with endorsements, but most of them are getting some kind of a program. So those guys will wind up spending money. You know, you take a Garmin 16 today, and gosh, I don't even know what retail is on one, probably $6,500.
Yeah, 16-incher if you're going to throw a black box and an LVS 34 in there and then actually install it. Yeah, you're over you're between 5 and 7K in for sure.
Yeah, you're definitely in the high dollar range. I think you're probably over 7 retail, Matt, but with an LVS 34 live scope. But definitely, those are the same problems. And I don't care if you run an Apex unit or a Lowrance unit or any brand, you know, whether you're running Humminbird's Apex or Lowrance or, I mean, gosh, let's just go get a Raymarine. But the point is we'll get TV sets on these boats, and we were resistant to that change because the only people we really saw doing that were the pros. This is all developed in a short period of time trying to get to live scope. And so it's really come along. And I remember we had the first Garmin units that we played with Panoptix were at the dinner meeting at Heber Springs, not Heber Springs, I apologize, at D-Gray. We were at State Park at D-Gray. And I guess that'd be somewhere around the 2016 or 15, 16 year. And those were the first Panoptic units, and they just weren't real clear. You know, you could see a fish, you could tell it was a fish, but it wasn't that good, you know. And LVS 32 brought that forward. Active Target kind of came in behind it. Now you've got Mega Live that still has some growth to do, and Humminbird's working diligently on that. They've got the technology. They just got to get the units. And so then you've got LVS 34, so you got Live Scope 34, and Active Target 2 comes in just before Live Scope 34. So is it over? No, it's not over. But one of the things you mentioned, you said, let's go there if we want to. And
yep.
I'm going to change that path a little. So there's no doubt you got Mitch building NBT screens, and I've watched what Mitch is doing. And now you've got Fishing Obsessed building offset arms. You've got the new guys building a live scope mount that goes around the shaft of the trolling motor out of Kentucky, and what Paul's doing there, and that's not out yet. That's yet to come. That's going to be introduced this quarter. That's a pretty cool unit. And you got everybody doing a turret, everybody doing something. So this is just changing so fast. I mean, I think you've seen it, but that Jag 500 I'm running, it's in my garage. And so Jag STS with the 500R, and I've got an Apex unit on the dash. I've got another ACS 9 because I think you need pixel count. You need resolution. I don't think you need size. So I've got real high resolution screens.
Okay.
And I'm going to high resolution front screens also.
Okay.
And running Garmin, and I run Humminbird, and I run Lowrance, and I run all 4 units, you know. And so basically by running those, 3 brands. But anyway, I've got 360, Mega Live, HDI, and
Live
Scope 34 on the front of the boat. So at one point, the trolling motor, the 360 the target lock and the brackets and the units all weighed roughly 175 pounds on the front of the boat. And so we've trimmed that down some. And I mean, if you've ever picked a guy up in a bass tournament, set him on the floor of the boat, you know how much he slowed it down. And I've certainly picked up a few. But, you know how much he slowed your boat down. Well, you're doing that every time you add all this weight to the bow. Now, Power Poles came out with a lighter trolling motor, and we're all working on weight. But now these guys pull lithium batteries into the equation and take the weight out of the back of the boat, and the engines aren't able to go down in some cases far enough on some boats. I didn't say any brand, but they've got to get the motor down because you pull that weight out. There's this theory, they're even doing weighted battery boxes now. So you're pulling the weight out, and now you're sticking the weight back in, when in reality, you got to change prop, you got to change setup, and you got to get the motor down the water, because when you pull all that weight out, it changes it. There's so much going on with electronics, so much going on with boats. You kind of taken me down a different path.
Oh no, it's all good. We go down any path we want on this show, Rick.
Yeah, but you know, I've said this before, and I'll say it again on camera. For 30 years, ever since this started back in the 2000 era, when we started changing graphs and screens and things like that, my theory has been a wraparound screen with about 5 options on it. The wraps front of the boat. Now, it won't be high res, and I mean, it won't be high size, won't be large size, but giving you options. And so you basically do, I mean, I don't know if you've ever drove a Tesla, but the Tesla screen's a pretty cool deal, you know. And I think we can do things like that with bass boats, but even more than that is doing a wraparound flex screen. Corning's got the ability. Other companies have got the ability. Of course, in bass boat, heat's a big deal. So there's some work we've got to do with screens. But I want to build server racks. I want to get the Lowrances and the Humminbirds and the Garmins out of the screen business and get them in the hardware business and selling software. And you update your unit just like a server rack in your server, and you pull the rack out. You add RAM to your computer if you want to, you know, and basically get them building hard drives. And us control the screens, because we can buy screens. There's several companies that build screens. Mitch is the only one that's coming out and marketing a box screen, but there's other companies that build screens, and they do it in the saltwater business where they buy independent screens and do different things with them. And, you know, we can get screens that are high quality, that handle the heat, and control the size and operation of our boats. And I think that's where I'd like to see it go. So you've taken me down that road a little bit.
I like it. Are you talking about that NBT screen that some of the guys are good? Yeah, I had it pulled up here. That one right there.
Mitch, boy out of Canada, is building that screen.
Yeah, that's a 22-inch screen. One of the guys in the Opens ran it. I saw him at Eufaula this year, and he idled past me, and I was sitting there. I think I was talking to like Brandon McMillan or something, and I think I just stopped and went, "Dude, look at that!" I mean, it's like that big.
Yeah, we've got a customer in Louisiana, and he's kind of run a couple of boats. But his daughter actually won one of those high school major events in Louisiana. Okay. And he actually worked with Mitch originally on that screen years ago, and was one of the sounding boards. So we were aware of it because he was running it. It was on the down low, but we were somewhat aware of it. I really wasn't paying a lot of attention to it because I felt like they could get into it differently. I mean, you can take that NBT screen, and most people don't know this. You can buy the box off Garmin, you can buy the box off Lowrance, run a 22 or 16 NBT, and you can network it and split screen it on the front. Run Garmin on one side, run Lowrance on the other side of the screen.
All right, so here's my question then. You got all this stuff at the front. You talked about weight, but this was the first year, so I've got the Beatdown Ultimate Shorty double stack. So I've got a 12. It's heavy, but it's awesome when you have it when it's working. Then you got the 12 and the 10 up there. And I'm worried about like wind resistance and speed, right? Because listen, I've been in a cat now for like 6 or 7 years, and I don't care what people say. I like passing people, and I don't like getting passed. So I've had from the beginning, from when I had the 1.9 based, you know, the very first one that Jeffries had with Basso that I ran and stuff. I mean, I've had them all the way from 77.5 mile an hour boats down to 73 mile an hour boats with the links. I don't know what the thumbs up is doing on your screen there.
I have no idea. It's coming in. I'm
interesting. You're getting some thumbs up there, Rick. It's talking. I have no idea. We'll take a break on here.
It's on your system. I'm not tied in.
There's no way it could be. It could be on my system. I've seen it. Anyway, we'll roll. So here's my question then. Is that a weight thing? How is that a wind resistance thing? Like, what am I losing on my Cougar FTD right now based off those two graphs on the front? How should I be running those? Like, what? Like, that's got to be taking a couple miles an hour off, right?
Yeah, I talked about that setup with that. With that Micronar. The Micronar transducer back in that day weighed 5 pounds. Just a bronze transducer. So I could take that bronze transducer off, and I ran it on a 17-foot Caracal back in that day. I could take that bronze transducer off and literally gain 5 miles an hour if I wanted to with setup. But I could gain 2 pretty solid. So you're looking at 5 pounds on the bow basically makes about 1 mile to 2 mile an hour difference in most of these setups. Now, that Caracal was a unique boat. Mm-hmm. I was spinning a 25 cleaver, 6,600 RPM. It was quite quick, so that's different. But no doubt, it's hurting you in speed. It's hurting you. Wind resistance is an underestimated thing. We fight it. Even in console design, I want to work harder on wind resistance, and that's why today's console is more cosmetic. Last year's console was definitely wind resistant, the windshields and all that. You look at most windshields, they don't work. They're not windshields. They're plexiglass adornment. And so I'm more on function, and that's kind of where we've always driven things, is to function. So, wind resistance is definitely an issue. When you look at what's happening with the market right now, the weight factor, another thing people are doing with that weight, and I've talked to the guys that beat down. They're good guys, man. They're really good guys. The father and son own that business.
Blake
and
over there.
Blake over there. Yeah, and, Ivan Williams kind of got them into that party, and Ivan used to be sales manager here. But Ivan lives up there next door to him at Warsaw area, so he kind of got them sucked in on that business, and it's really grown. And Ivan had worked with them on some of their mounts, and Ivan's a pretty creative guy. But basically, Blake's taken that thing and ran with it. Dad's let him, and it's a bigger segment of his market than he ever thought. But one of the things I worry about, especially guys with older boats, none of our bows on an older boat, I don't care which brand you pick, are built to handle that weight. None of the backside reinforcement is made to handle the kind of weight we're putting on a 2005, XZY boat, 21 XZY, whatever brand it is. And so what you've got to do is you need to sandwich that deck, and the back plate needs to be larger than the top plate. It's a big common mistake people are making, is they're not reinforcing the backside. So basically, over time, that thing fatigues and harmonics and flex, and it basically tears the boat up.
Which I had it done at the Bass Tank, and they put that back plate on there.
Yeah, but I'm sure that I know the guys that at Beat Down are building a larger plate now. Originally made it the same size as the top plate, but now they're making them larger than the top plate, so they cover more surface area. And it's just one of those things you get, even if you have to custom cut it to make it fit, get lots of backing on it, because the back plate's what prevents that thing from walking on you.
And then I always make sure I run it as low. So I mean, if I'm going like right now, strung out, like I'm getting to the spot, I'm in the lead, I'm getting 74 out of like 73, depends on the size of my co-angler and if I've caught anything yet. Two important things, but I'm getting 74. So, I mean, I've got a 78 mile an hour boat. I've just got a bunch of stuff on the front of this thing, and you combine the wind resistance with the weight.
One of those mounts weighs like 14 pounds, man. Yep. You just keep adding 14 to 17 pounds on the bow. You got hardware, you got mount, you got backing plates. I'll tell you what we really need to do on some of those, and we haven't got there yet. And we talked to Blake about it, is make a pivot in it. And I'd like to make it all pivot down to the deck and have like stoppers,
just pop it back up, just like you drop a trolling motor. You can just pop your entire
grab back up. Exactly, and just make a pivot in the shaft. So when you grab this, it's laying on the deck. The problem is we're running out of room to do that on deck, so you can't make them wide enough with your rods and with your trolling motor and everything up there. And then you want to run a butt seat in most areas, especially if you're fishing offshore. I don't run a butt seat, but as my knees are bad and I get older, I'm going to have to run one more, because those offshore wakes, when they hit you, I'll just be out of the boat, you know. Mm-hmm. And so you got to be more careful. So definitely in the offshore market, the butt seat's a big deal. So you got to have a butt seat in there. So as I look at it, I think that getting the beat down mount, you mentioned weight, you mentioned all that, and those are all factors: weight, air, wind resistance, everything on performance. So you're wanting to chase a few mile an hour. That's what got us in this conversation.
Yeah. I never thought I'd be that guy, but I'm that guy now, Rick.
So is Iaconelli. Okay. He never was that guy, but he likes it. So that's why Ike's running a Cougar FTD this year, Matt. I talked to him earlier in the season. He get ready. I said, "So you gonna run an STS this year?" No. I like a Cougar. And what it really comes down to, he likes it. He's figured out he uses 5 square foot. He doesn't need a dance floor. And all of us use 5 square foot to fish. Yeah. The rest of that's for our partners or our gear, you know. So it's nice when you're handling fish, but you know, I watch these kids worry about things. I'll tell you a big one for me. This is a pet peeve. You're talking about fishing now. We'll change gears a little bit. Then I'll go into the sonar thing. But okay. I've spent a lot of time in the last couple of years watching anglers transition in the boat. And there are some really good ones. And some of them are really clean, but you know, we want to be efficient in the boat. So I watch them transition from the floor to the deck when they catch a fish. I watch them how they move around their trolling motor, and flip-flops. Now, barefoot guys are fine, but flip-flops are the biggest joke in the business. Would you play basketball in flip-flops? Would you play baseball in flip-flops? Would you play football in flip-flops?
No, I would not, Rick.
And we fish in flip-flops. I don't. And some of the guys wear back sandals, and those are fine. They seem pretty good. But even they kind of stumble around a little because they're watching the rod, trying not to get a hook in a toe. And so they're very aware of where they're at. And, dude, a pair of tennis shoes, you know, having the gear to do the job is a big thing. So I'm watching, and people wouldn't think you look at that, but I look at transition from the deck to the floor, how people operate their equipment, how they space around and move around. One of the biggest notices I made in the last 2 years, especially the younger anglers coming in, because a lot of them are wearing flip-flops, and they are clumsy.
I'm a flip-flop guy, and Rick, this is bringing back. Okay. This is bringing back Harold Allen and the days of Mark and Harold. Harold was the most anti flip-flop guy, and this was in 2008, 9, 10. I mean, he would dog cuss anybody that wore flip-flops in the boat. And coming in, I mean, I'm a flip-flop guy, but I've blown out flip-flops. I've gotten jerkbait hooks in my big toe. Especially on the Great Lakes, there is zero stability. I always wondered why guys who fish Great Lakes either fished with Gore-Tex shoes on or nothing at all. And it's because you don't get the stability on it. So even when I go up to Thousand Islands, I will not wear the flip-flops because of the stability. But I have not heard a good flip-flop rant in probably a decade. So that made my morning.
Well, good for you. But that was just one of the things you look at. And I've been studying it a lot the last 2 to 3 years, really 1 to 2 years. But I kind of noticed it 3 years ago. And then I started paying attention on Bass Live, doing it on BPTs and watching these guys as they transition. And, dude, it's just some of them, they're just plain clumsy. I mean, I would not show up without a good pair of tennis shoes and play basketball, you know.
That's a great point.
And that's what they do. And these kids are fishing. They're putting $100,000 plus out to fish and leaving $2 sneakers, you know. You go to Walmart, buy a set of $11 sneakers, you know, if you don't have good Nikes. But get something. So that's what it's been a real notice I've made. And I think if they pay attention to themselves, they'll just figure out they're just really not efficient. But that's one of the notices. And I've studied that because I'm studying how they move from the trolling motor. How does a person act? What do they do when they pick it up? Who's efficient? And, some of the cleanest guys are the most scrambled guys. We talk about Aaron. Aaron was really clean fisherman, but he had to keep everything clean because he was scrambled. Gerald's a clean fisherman. John Cruz is a clean fisherman with he's not scrambled, but
no, he's got everything together.
Yeah, John's got it all together. Gerald, he definitely has to do it. And Gerald's a good friend. I'm not talking about you, G.
Yep.
But him and Leanne, great people. But no doubt, he had to kind of figure it out, and he did. And so definitely Gerald's one of those that is not scrambled, but he keeps his stuff, is scrambled, but keeps his stuff in order, And he's much more organized a boat than he is some other places. I get tickled at him.
Yeah. We got to take a break here. Before we do, a couple things I want to knock out, though. Did you say you have a 500R on your Jaguar?
I got one in my building. I've got we got to have one here to demo. Yeah. And so, we actually sell the 400R. It's an excellent platform.
I think I've seen that.
Yeah, it is an excellent platform, but the 500R is in the barn, and and it's a cool deal. It's triple digits. Bass Boating Magazine did a deal. We went to Wawasee and ran it in early October at Wawasee, and we made a run up there. Actually, it was early November or October, I don't know, some weeks back, and up in Indiana. And John Tiger and I spent time in it up there, so Boating's going to run a piece on it. I think we got it up around 98 that day with he and I, and it's got triple digits on the speedo. So, if you save your maximum speedometer time. And there's been a couple of us take it to that level, but it's a learning curve. It's a big boat. That one probably weighs in the 4,500 pound range, and it's a lot of weight moving in that range. But that's not for everyone, Matt, and not everybody can afford it. But for those that can afford it, we highly try to push them to the 400R.
All right. And then I did find, we talked a little bit. We talked to all the advancements. I've wanted to do this for a long time. I did find it. So I want to run a piece from the 2007 ICAST. It's actually Clark Wenlett talking about this Panoptic stuff. I think it's interesting compared to what we are now. This is kind of when I first saw it. Can you see that?
Oh yeah.
Look at that. There it is. There it is. Holy cow. Look at those blobs. I remember the first time seeing that. Going, okay, what are we looking at? Look at that right there.
2007, you said?
That was 2017. That was
2017. Yeah, that's the same. I was going to say, I don't remember it 7. Yeah, 17. Yeah. Yeah.
Look at that.
That's what it looked like. There's no doubt. And yes, you could see, but I remember the picture well. We had it in the dock over there at DeGray, and we were dropping it in the dock, and you can see the crappie, you can see the carp, you can kind of tell because it's a big fish,
Yeah.
That's quite a sight. And we ran it a little bit. We sold a few of them, but man, has it come a long way.
I remember the first time I ever saw it, I was at a Table Rock media event with Dynamic, and Matt Lee had it on his boat, and it looked just like that. And it was in the fall, and he's like, dude, come look at this. He goes, this is really freaking cool. And this was before he knew it. And he had an Alabama rig, and he cast it out. And I'm like, what am I looking at? And he's like, you see that blob? He goes, see this blob going? He goes, that's my lure. And I was like, holy cow. He goes, that's the Alabama rig. You can actually see it. And there's a little bit of a delay, and it was just the red blobs. And he reeled it past this tree, and all these blobs came out of the tree. And I'm like, still trying to comprehend, because we've always just read, right to left on the graphs, Rick. So, when you've done that from the time you've been in a boat, the first time you see a live TV screen, you're not comprehending what's going on. And he's like, yeah, that was 15 spotted bass that just followed my Alabama rig back in. That was the first time I'd ever seen it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a cool deal. You know what it does? It makes me mad at myself, because back when I fished years ago, we didn't accept that technology, and we didn't really take it to the next level. we could have done so much even with what we had that we didn't really search outside the box in that. Like I said, I get mad at myself because the opportunity, even for a standard flasher running 2 cones, we tried it, we played with it, and it was gimmicky, and we quit. It's just like Microdar M810. I never perfected it. The weight of the transducer threw me off. I didn't want the weight on the front of the boat, and we just didn't embrace technology like we are today.
All right, we're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, more with Rick Pierce from Basscat. Are you cool diving into the state of the industry, Rick? Because we got a bunch going on in the industry. I don't know if you've noticed lately.
Path with you on that committee that Bass did, and state of the industry's good, man. Whatever you want.
All right, we'll do that. It is BTL on a Monday. It's Thanksgiving week. Happy Thanksgiving, by the way. We'll have shows Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and I think we might even run a Thursday.
Everybody remember to be thankful this year, man. Let's all be thankful.
Absolutely. BTL on a Monday with Rick Pierce. We'll be back right after this.
The new Puma STS has been redesigned from the ground up. With the angler, design, function, and performance in mind, nothing on this new offering was compromised, and the only thing carried over from the previous version is the name. Based on the Soft Touch series hull that started with the flagship Jaguar, this new model is nimble and performs incredibly well at all speeds with either a 250 or 300 horsepower engine. Featuring a new 96-inch wide-body footprint, this hull measures out at 20 foot 7 inches in length. Industry-leading design coupled with tournament-winning performance. The Puma STS from Basscat. Feel the rush.
All right, guys, if you're a construction worker, soccer dad, soccer mom, you want to be outdoors, you've seen the Reaper. This right here is the zip-up full Reaper, but it's windproof, folks, windproof. And it actually has the mast built in. It's behind me. I mean, if you can look good, feel good, and stay warm, you better check it out. It's the zip-up Reaper. That's right, windproof.
Elite Series Pro Daryl Gleason here. My Pro Guide batteries keep me going on those long tournament days and long practice days. Always plenty of juice, never fail. The best part about Pro Guide batteries, it's the people behind the company. They have over 40 years experience in the battery business, keeping all of us fishermen out on the water longer, catching more fish. Check them out at ProGuideBatteries.com.
What's up, Bass Talk Live fans? Brandon Polnick here. And ever since I won a couple Bassmaster Elite Series events on X-Zone Lures, I've been getting a bunch of questions of what makes them so special and different. And really, the truth is, it's in the details. The little details, things like no cheap fillers in their plastic. That gives you more lifelike action, more realistic and vibrant colors. But don't just take my word for it. Go to www.xzonelures.com and check them out for yourself.
All right, welcome back, BTL on a Monday with the man Rick Pierce. Also want to remind everybody, if you have not already had a chance to check it out, head over to omniafishing.com. They're doing a deal right now. Everybody loves hoodies. It's hoodie season right now. I literally have a closet, Rick. I have a hoodie issue. I have a closet full of hoodies because then you get a cool hoodie and you can't get rid of the old ones. They kind of nostalgia. Anyway, Omnia's doing a deal. Select Daiwa reels. Right now at Omnia, you get a limited edition select Daiwa hoodie along with the purchase. There's also a really cool Beast Coast giveaway there, the jigs that I've come to like because Travis Manson designed those open water sniper jigs for the smallmouth up at Thousand Islands. But all right, before the break, I teased it that I wanted to get Rick to get into the state of the industry and kind of give him the floor in whichever direction you seem appropriate. So the floor is yours.
That's an interesting one. Yeah. Where are we going to go here? Hey, I'm going to tell you where I'm going to go.
Okay.
EQs.
Yep.
Probably the strongest group that has ever come into professional fishing coming out of the EQs. These young men, and they're all young men, have fished 9 events, have qualified strong, have fought to the end, have struggled through. They understand the challenges of where they're going in the elites, and they're going to wind up succeeding at the elite level. I think all 9, I don't care if you're talking about JT Tompkins, I don't talking about Robert, I don't care if you're talking about any of them. I'm sorry to see Bobby Lane just not make it barely. I would like to have seen Bobby make it. Bobby's made the decision to go the other way. Of course, Randall Thorpe, everybody's making these decisions. I saw Randall the other day. This is everything is very unique, and I've got a different take on it, but the EQs definitely have brought the strongest group out. I think next year will be the second strongest group we've ever seen, because the people who didn't qualify this year will now come to the top. And then I think you've got a 3-year cycle that is going to improve the quality of angler on the open level tremendously.
You mentioned that Bassmaster just announced over the weekend the field of 2024 EQ anglers, topping out at just over 150 anglers, with a lot of invitational anglers, a handful of BPT anglers, and a lot of former Elite Series anglers in the mix. So it will be very interesting to see how it goes this year. And I think Bass has surpassed their wildest expectations. Obviously, last year they were hoping, and I think Hank would tell you, they were hoping to hit 100, and they had 176. And then this year you talk about how difficult the economy is, and it is not a lucrative venture to jump into the opens except for a small percentage. So to maintain that at 150 going into the second year of all 9, I think is a win for Bass.
Yeah, I think they've done a good job with the platform to have these people have to qualify through this EQ setup. I think they've set up in the past. You know, when we first started the top 100s, I didn't fish them the first year. I came in a year or 2 afterwards and fished top 100s, and definitely made the choice to go back to building boats for a living, because that took too much time, and then you got family and everything else, and 2 young kids to raise, and just everything going on in the 90s. But when we did that, we threw those guys under the bus that came in that weren't used to traveling. Until you've spent 14 or 17 days on the water in a row in a qualifying event away from home, you don't understand it. You go fish 2 or 3 tournaments back to back. If anyone hasn't done that, they don't understand the grind of the road, the grind of structure. And the guys are a little more comfortable today, because back then we all stayed in hotel rooms, and some of them do VRBOs now. So there's a little more comfort. It's easier to rent a house than it was years ago. I mean, there were a few guys renting houses in the 90s, but it was pretty uncommon. Most of the guys just stayed in hotel rooms. So that's a little more comfortable, but basically until you felt the grind, your equipment breaks, and you don't have the tools to fix it. You can't carry everything. And so having dependable equipment that you understand is a big part of it. I don't care if it's rods, reels. I mean, gosh, in the 90s, I carried full gear sets, pawls, all the guides for my rods, quick lie tire so I could tie new guides on. Everybody had a stick of ferrule type, put a tip guide on. Man, I mean, there's just so much you had. And until you spent time on the road, understanding that is really hard. So I think that Bass is giving these guys an opportunity to feel it and understand it at a different level. So they're not going to have that 2-3 year growing cycle coming into the elites that everybody else had this year. That's going to be strong.
A lot of former Elite Series anglers that are fishing all 9, a couple of surprises. And we'll get some of these guys on. And there's a couple that haven't announced it, that have never fished bass before. They're coming over from the BPT, but just based on the Bassmaster article, you have Cliff Pace, obviously Randall Tharp, Daryl Gleason, Chad Grigsby, Brett Height, Charlie Hartley, Mike McClellan, Ish Monroe, James Niggemeyer, Garrett Paquette, Russ Lane, Gary Klaus getting back in all 9. Gary Klaus grinding through the opens, Rick. Yusuke Miyazaki.
Kids on both shoals, man.
Casey Scanlon and Shane Lineberger are just some of the former Elite Series pros, and then there's three Japanese anglers, Koya, Kenta, and Masayuki are all fishing them. Those guys, they work their tails off, those Japanese anglers. You know, I watched Kenta this year. The guy fishes the entire Elite Series season. Then he qualifies, he double qualifies back in through the EQs. Goes through a lot of cigarettes on those days in the water.
Amasa smokes more cigarettes than Kenta.
It is. I fished around him once. It is just a steady stream of. It looks like he's smoking some brisket out there.
Yeah, I remember back in the Invitational days. One day, Clun drew Fenton and Dave Fenton, and that was rare, but somehow they wound up fishing together, and I don't remember what it was because back then we couldn't draw, so it had to be a mixed up draw in a flight or something because you couldn't draw your home state, and somehow he and Rick wound up together. Well, Rick was probably living in Missouri, so anyway, he drew Clun, and that was probably after he moved to Missouri. But anyway, they drew each other, and they're in the boat together, and Rick looked back at him, and I'll never forget Dave telling me this because we were running together at the time. He looked back at him, he said, "I hope you keep doing that." And Dave said, "What?" "I hope you keep smoking cigarettes all day because every time you do, I get 2 more casts."
I remember back when Bass did the butt cam. Do you remember that when they were trying to figure out how to do this live coverage? And they're like, well, we can put a GoPro, and then the GoPro had Wi-Fi technology, and they'd run it through their box, and then you could like click on it. So it was just a live butt cam. What it ended up being was you saw the back of guys, and then every time they took a leak off the boat, you text your buddy and be like, yeah. But there were a couple guys there that didn't want their wives or family to know that they need a little nicotine to relax a little bit. So you'd roll up and take photos, and they'd be hovered underneath the camera in the back corner of the boat, either dipping or smoking, so the camera wouldn't pick up on it for 3 or 5 minutes.
Yeah. I talked to Hank the other day, and of course Hank's got that fully loaded deal, and I said, he's been doing it for years, and I said, does it work? He said, yeah, it works. He said, I don't even desire nicotine anymore.
Awesome.
So that is a good deal, and actually we just worked a deal at Russell Marine last week. So last Thursday we were at Russell and got to visit with Hank. Actually, last Thursday I guess it was. Maybe been last Thursday or Tuesday. It was last week anyway. Days run together when you drive like that, I was here Friday, so it was Wednesday night or Tuesday night. But anyway, Hank was there, and John came over and spoke. Steve Kennedy came in and visited with the kids. So we had all of them there. We had 120 roughly kids, high school kids. But I asked Hank, I said, does it work? And he said, yeah, it does. He said, I've quit. He says, don't even have a desire for it. So I think there's options today to get off of it and different tobaccos and things. But yeah, you're right. That was a big deal back then.
It definitely. Buddies with Josh Bertrand, longtime sponsor of his was Smoky Mountain, and he's hooked me up with a bunch of Smoky Mountain in the past. But one of the things you said you wanted to talk about was this BASS technology committee, right, Rick?
Yeah.
I'll share the article that it came out with, just if you guys have. There's been so much going on. Like, this is a big deal, but then everyone starts moving, and then it gets lost in the mix. So I'm glad you brought this up. Bass creates committee and institutes technology review for the 2024 Elite Series season. In a roundabout way, what they're saying is, hey, we're going to monitor how much of an impact forward-facing sonar and technology has on this year, how it impacts the number of fish caught, how they're caught, the overall viewing experience, the numbers, and what people think. But in the process, what they did was say, hey, free for all in 2023.
Yeah, well, they have a free for all, but we're going to see, and no different than some people have said like restrictor plates at Talladega.
Yep,
we're gonna see something. I think it has to end at the level it's at. I don't think we're going to ever see LiveScope go away. Again, like I said, I was mad at myself because we've had a lot of this technology to do this, and we didn't really. The older generation didn't really do a good job of taking it to the level. We had the tools, we just didn't learn how to use them, and so I think there's, we were stuck in our ways. So I think that this has definitely opened it up, and there's going to be some things change. You know, in bass fishing, this is kind of funny. You know, if they will drill an end unit and weld it to save weight. So they will drill a spindle and seal it up and face it to save weight. And I mean, it can't be losing a lot of sprung weight there, you know, but you're still losing weight. And so they'll do anything they can to save weight and try to cut the borders even of safety. And I remember one guy that my brother-in-law follows NASCAR more than I did, and we ran together, raced cars together years ago. But he's worked on several of the tire crews, and one of the guys he was talking about, they figured out that they could drill a thousandth of an inch hole in the sidewall of a tire. Now, I mean, this is a small hole, and it would vent when it heated up. So they figured out what size hole they needed in that tire to keep the pressure while they're running the race. And they caught that particular situation, and the car got exceptionally fast.
Mm-hmm.
And, obviously he can control pressure through the whole race. And they could do it different tires, different, whichever one's hotter. They figured out exactly how to control the tire pressure during the race. And by drilling this thousandth of an inch hole, and yes, he was penalized. Yes, he had to take three races off, I think. And yes, he was probably the fall guy for the team. But the point is, in bass fishing, if you did that, they blackball you. And in NASCAR, you're not. So some of these people are trying to basically change the game in bass fishing. And it's definitely good to change the game. But I think we're going to see some regulations come in, and then it's going to be seeing how it comes down. And just like NASCAR's regulated at those levels, we're going to see the same thing. I mean, there's power converters trying to get clean power. The crappie guys are big on it, and they're trying to you can buy boosters that supposedly clean the power to the unit. Mm-hmm. And, it's all just RF noise we're trying to control. So nobody's going to run it on an oscilloscope. And if you run it on an oscilloscope, you'll find the RF noise and try to regulate it. And eventually it's going to get crazy with these people. And as it does, we're definitely going to need to regulate some things, And so factory units will be coming in because people are going to be doing their own thing. Mitch is going to wind up having people with screen limitations, maybe going. And here's another factor people haven't thought about, Matt. We can't mount a lot of that. Legally, regulatory-wise, we can't. And the first time one of these guys has an accident and the screen's in the air, there's going to be a liability issue. Bass has to accept that. They allow these guys to go on the water, so it's going to get looked at from a safety standpoint, if nothing else.
That's a great point that I don't think many people have thought about.
Yeah, I took a picture of a particular unit when I told you how much mine weighed here about a year ago, and I took multiple pictures of that unit, and there was a boat in the horizon that I could not see at certain points. And so we fixed that. We took the weight off. We dropped the units down to get them to a safe level. But NMMA has a viewing angle, and that viewing angle is one of those things people are going to have to look at, and that alone is going to regulate it from safety, because there's no way we're bordering safety on some of this.
Yeah, that's something that hasn't been I haven't heard brought up in any of the discussions.
Well, but back when bass went to a 250 rating and we were allowing ourselves to run 20-foot boats, back in those days, I wanted bass to look at positive level flotation, because there's brands out there that don't have it. They don't have to have it over 20 foot. So there's people out there that could run boats without foam. Well, you put a guy out going like we would go to Duck Island, and back years ago, Tucker went to Duck Island, Joe Thomas went to Duck Island, I went to Duck Island. There weren't very many of us went to Duck Island because you had to run out there on a cup. You didn't have GPS. And so there were 3 or 4 of us went out there. You get out to Duck Island, you come back, you go out in the fog. In the morning sometimes, you come back in the wind, and it's hard to go and come. Now, how would you like to be out in Duck Island and a set of 8-footers coming back 15 miles to the ferry and absolutely not have a boat that would float if it got through a wave?
Yeah, no, I was always told out on Ontario that if you make a mistake, just stay with the boat because it'll always stay up and you'll just roll into the shore eventually somewhere and you'll be safe. But yeah, you never thought about one. Just you had one under you and now it's on the bottom.
Yeah, anything over 20 foot 1 inch legally in Coast Guard specs doesn't have to have flotation. Not a pound.
Huh.
So NMA requires it, and everything we built for decades, that's the reason years ago we didn't have rear storage. So until we got to fiberglass boxes, we couldn't get good, because we like our foam to be encapsulated, so we couldn't get to where we could get a lot of rear storage because we wanted big rear foam boxes because that's what it took the way the Coast Guard tested everything. And so we had these huge rear foam boxes, kept the back end and the motor all afloat because you had to have them higher. And so now today there's a little more levity on that. The Coast Guard's changed it a little bit. Now they did come in a few years ago and change the weights of engines. So our engines have to go to the new 4-stroke weights, and that changed the way it is. So you have to have more foam, but more flotation. You don't have to have foam. You can use air flotation. You can put anything in there, plastic balls filled with air, but you do have to have flotation that will handle being drilled to a degree. And so in doing that, these boats have got to stay up. But in the years that we went to a 250 rating, we could have got by without a lot of that. And if you got out there and got submerged one, speared one, and you've seen them submerged and your pumps aren't working right or something, your boat's not staying up in some particular cases.
It's interesting. Hank Parker just talked about how many years it took him to get out to duck. And he finally was able to get out there with Cooper Gallant. He was on the show last week. Hank was, and it was a really, really good chat. But okay, so I've made that. I love Thousand Islands. Like when I knew that the Opens and Bass was going to go there, I went and spent 14 straight days in Clayton and that whole area just learning it. And I'm obsessed with it anyway. It's fun. Sometimes you got to have fun, Rick, right?
I've got a 7/12 picture of a smallmouth here I caught out of Sturgeon Bay. and the only other one, I've had two big ones like that come to the boat, and one of them my wife lost at Sturgeon Bay a couple of years later, and she just wasn't handling it, and it was hard. It was a big fish. And then I had one that smoked a spinner bait that I'll never forget out by Fox Ferry on the island out there, and by Fox Island. I mean, it smoked a spinner bait, and I just froze. And it was in practice of an opener invitational up there. And I mean, I'll never forget that. I was burning spinnerbait across those rocks, and that thing looked like a school bus coming at me.
But you've got,
I love it up there, man. I love it up there.
But so you go out, you got your ferry there on the right, and then you can kind of see the islands off on the distance on your left. And then you got duck that's out there that you can't see. So you would literally get out to the mouth and pull out a compass.
I ran one on the front bow.
Okay, so you had a built-in compass on the front bow, so when you're running you could tell what direction you were running in. So you knew that out of the mouth that duck was what? I'm horrible at directions. Whatever. Northeast. So if you're staying that, you keep that heading, and then eventually, boom, you'll see the speck. You
see the speck, and you just run to the island. And the first year we got out there with GPS, it was crazy. There were 20-some boats out there, and I looked, and Roland Martin's in the gap fishing, and he has got a 70-inch trolling motor, 72-inch. He's made a custom Minn Kota or whatever, and he had a 70-some inch hand control, and he's up on the front of the boat, tied himself, I think, to the butt seat, fishing in that shad school that was right there in the gut. I mean, Roland always pushed the envelope anyway, but I never forget looking over there, and nobody else was going to hang in the water. Yeah. And he had this great big long hand control, and he was on the front of a boat just going up and down like a cork.
We're an hour in. You want to talk a little bit about bass boats?
We've talked a lot about bass.
I know, but what we got going now, I was talking to you before. Obviously, it seems like massive success with the Puma.
Amazing.
STS, and now there's a new STS in the lineup.
Yeah, Caracal STS, and there's going to be a lot of people buy that one that need a Puma. Puma's an awesome ride. Puma STS is an amazing ride, amazing equipment, dual tray at the front, so you can run two units on the bow without having to have a mount. So you don't have to have a mount. And Puma STS is an amazing deal. That STS hull we made in the Jag. We didn't name it an STS then because we couldn't tell everybody we had a little different hull. The Jag, we didn't slow it down, so it has all the performance left in it, because if you build it slower, that boat with that 400, 500, and 450 at the time, we want to keep that performance rolling,
Mm-hmm.
And so we definitely wanted the performance in the Jag hull. Different market. Boat's already huge anyway, 22 foot, and it's got a lot of bow. It's the bow rise on it from the front 7 inches deeper than a Puma STS. But the Puma STS is another version of the STS hull. And then this year we've made a Caracal STS off that Caracal platform, and it's not a Puma. A lot of guys are going to buy it wanting a Puma, but it is a Caracal style hull. But it does have the STS features on the hull. It does ride better than, for example, than a Caracal does. Caracal, which is now available in an SP package. It rides good. It's going to be really good to navigate bigger water because of the way it handles. It's going to be nimble, so it's going to be really good in bigger water. So you'll be able to get down in them and navigate them. And so that's going to be good with that model. So it's a quick model, a little quicker, not a lot quicker because it's big, but it's not that much different in length, but the hull's different. So that's kind of where we're at. But the Puma STS is the strongest launch we've had since Pantera 2 in 1988.
All right, I got to ask at least one Mark Jeffries question. Who knows where the economy's going, Rick? And this is a big investment. When it comes to the bass boat market, we're seeing a lot of the pros with their boats for sale now, moving them going into the 2023 year. In this game, you know what it's like. Talk a little bit about what you see going forward in the next couple years as far as the bass boat market in that industry. That's a good Jeffries question, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a good Jeffries question. So as a company, we're pretty good. We've got some backlog. We're out into the early spring. And so we're good as a company right now. We're not running at the level we ran during COVID. We're off, and we're running about 70% of where we were during COVID. We probably could run a little harder, and that might be something we need to do. As an industry, the industry's had some real challenges. It's got some over inventory in certain brands. Certain brands thought they had demand during COVID and found out they didn't have demand, they had supply. And you couldn't get a boat during COVID. At one point, we were at 1.5 years on production. We actually purged over 500 stock orders for dealers, just purged them, took them off the map because dealers could buy them if we built them, but we couldn't build them. So what good are the orders, So we reset all the order base. We're out pretty good right now. Guys your age, Matt, don't understand interest. And I think we talked about this a few months ago.
Yep.
The interest today is a big deal to them. Interest is normal to me. This is where we were. You can take an interest rate graph, and with Google today, you can find all kinds of them. So you don't have to go know your banker or find an investment firm to get them. You can take an interest rate graph and go back 100 years. This is normal interest today. This is not high interest. This is normal. And so other than World War II and coming out of that, and a few areas that were basically induced economies. So they were induced by all the buying, all the manufacturing, all the industrial sector, all the just surviving a war. There's, you go into the 30s or some of that. And other than those economies that were induced economies, we're in a normal pattern right now. My first home was a 10% home. At that time in Arkansas, that's the most they could charge on interest. I had a lot of 7% buys, cars at 14. Those are things that people did. And today this interest has changed. So there's going to be a change. It has to come back to where today's youth, and when I say youth, younger adults, they are going to have to adjust where interest is because they haven't seen that. So that's definitely impacted it. And then out west, you've got the cost of fuel, which right now oil's not killing us in the $80 range. Gasoline here in Mountain Home right now is about $2.70 a gallon. So we're not getting killed by it, $2.89, I just got back from Alabama, as I said, and gas was in the sub $2 to $3 range all the way across. So one of the things that's always happened in a recession, and I still believe this, is oil kind of leads into a recession. Oil doesn't act like it's in a recession. Spending doesn't act like it's in a recession. Jobs don't act like they're in a recession. How can we feel like we're in a recession? And, we've got to rebalance the market from boats, but you still have a challenge getting cars. So cars are a problem. Trucks are a problem. So I think the market's just different. Maybe it's just normalizing right now. And as it normalizes, that's where I feel like we are. It's going to take some time. Now we're seeing guys that can't finance boats. And I knew we'd have $100,000 boats. I mean, I go back, I've said this before. I remember when they were $2,000. I remember when they were $3,500. I remember when they were $5,000, $7,500, $8,500, $10,000. And now a package is $100,000. So, I remember all those phases. When bass boats got to $25,000, I told my dad, said, "Oh my gosh, we can't keep doing this. How can we do this for $25,000? People can't afford it." I said, "Well, Dad," I said that all the way through and went through every year just like that. I said, "At this point in time," I said, "people will buy. They'll continue to buy because they want it. If they want it, they'll buy it." And so that's where we're at today. Has the market changed? Yes. Today, and I'm going to be real honest, we are seeing growth in the market. Growth in the bass fishing market, growth in the boat market. It's kind of normalized back to where it was in those pre-COVID times. So I think it's normal again. The numbers in this market, and I've said it on this show before, were huge in the 80s, huge. So bass fishing isn't more popular today. It has more media on it. Another thing that the industry's realized from an engine standpoint or a graph standpoint or replacement item standpoint, you have to be involved in bass fishing to get media coverage. There aren't a lot of shows for a Mercury Marine that show you life on a pontoon boat.
That's a fair point.
So Mercury Marine is chasing brand image through us. Yeah. And we're lucky they are. We're lucky as a sport, as an industry that they are, that Mercury Marine's talking about engines because, if there were a pontoon show that was focused on pontoons and it's a bigger market than we got, then maybe they'd be focused on pontoons. Mm-hmm. Right now, they don't have that show. So from a social media standpoint, from a marketing standpoint, they have to push fishing.
That's a great point.
So, we're fortunate that drives it. So we drive all this Repower branding. We drive all this, which is, it's the same for walleye. Walleye is a niche market. I mean, it's basically the majority of the market is South Dakota to Michigan. It actually isn't even in Michigan, really. It kind of stops in Wisconsin, the biggest part of the market. The majority of the market, the biggest majority by far, just like Texas is bass fishing, hey, man, Minnesota's huge for walleye.
Oh, yeah. When I was up there, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Everyone's a walleye fisherman.
Oh, yeah, walleye. And basically they're depending on our market because there's not a lot of walleye programming other than a few things within fishermen and what Ron and the Winklemans and all them have done, and so there's a few of them, but really there's not a lot.
Anglers.
Gary Roach does a little, but really, there's just not a lot out there other than some, and they're all smaller networks and they don't have good social media followings. They got numbers that are more regional. Mm-hmm. But from a spread, it's bass fishing's where it's able to market, and we're able to get the benefit of that. And so we've got to get that. And another thing we got to do is we got to train our anglers. So this is a different game, but I saw this on a network, and I've said it recently, and I've said it before. And it's just like when we went west with what we were trying to do out there, and we did succeed in that to a degree, and it failed. But it wasn't our failure, but definitely it was a success in what we were doing in the market. And that is, as anglers, we have to promote our sport. We have to get it with these high school kids, college kids. College and high school is huge right now, and we're seeing that growth that we see that we talked about just now coming out of high school and college. And so We've got to see high school and college coming forward, and we've got to bring anglers into the sport. Young professionals that are coming out and don't know what to do, looking for something in their time. And, the golf course isn't near as intriguing as it once was to some of them. And maybe it's hunting and fishing. Maybe it's just fishing. Maybe it's just hunting. But the outdoors are where it's at. And let's get them in the outdoors. And so as stewards of our sport, we need to promote fishing better. And every angler's biggest job is to promote fishing.
All right, Rick, you got a number of plaques behind you. I would like you to take us out here, and I appreciate you spending over an hour and a half on BTL. I always enjoy you coming on, and we have no idea where we're going to go whenever we're on, so it's always a fun conversation. But I want you to pick a plaque behind you and tell me what are your best fish stories from any of those, because you can't look at a plaque without having a memory that comes to mind when you see one that makes you smile.
The one I should have won was Okeechobee. I had 1 pound the first day and had a kind of a funky draw. And that stands to mind because I finished 19th with 1 pound the first day at Okeechobee. So that one's a memory, but put that one aside. And that was a cool story because I finished with Charlie and Jimmy Houston and all of them watching me catch fish, not knowing how I did it. I drove Steve Daniels the last day, and I reached and grabbed Steve's bait midair. Steve will tell you this, midair, and broke it off and tied the bait on and showed him how to fish it. And 2 casts later, he caught a fish. Steve Daniels, guides on Okeechobee at the time. It was home to him at Clewiston. He had gone 2 days without a fish. So that was a cool story. But the best story is the one where I had worked with a guy named Kevin Worth, and that's a 6th place at Santee. And that one's a cool one. There's a memory there. There's a couple other memories. I can talk about some of the plaques, but the 6th place was one of the cherished ones because I had gotten with Kevin and we'd kind of agreed he would fish the ditch and I would fish what I was fishing. And I was fishing a stick bait in a current in a canal, and it was blowing pretty hard through there. And it was blowing so hard, and I was fishing it so fast. I drew Mike Otten. I drew a guy named Tim McDonald out of Indiana, that event, and I turned around and I was fishing it so fast, every one of them couldn't believe it. Gerald Crawford pulled up to me shooting photos, and when he pulled up, he literally stopped and put the camera down and did.
We lost Rick. I wonder if his phone died. We needed to take a break anyway. Oh, Rick's back.
No, there we go. No, my phone cut in. Hang on.
Okay. No, you're back. You're good.
Yeah, I don't know why I had my cell service turned off.
You're talking to Gerald Crawford. Crawford had just put down his camera.
And he looked at me. He said, "My gosh, Rick." And I was fishing that bait that fast all day long. He said, "You fish that fast all day long?" All day long, Gerald. How do they catch it? About that time, one caught it. And
reaction.
It was a reaction bite, and I was fishing it faster than I've ever fished a bait. But Kevin had the best pattern. I had a spot I'd caught a couple of big fish, and last day, my best fish came on this one spot each day. And a friend of mine had come through the canal. He's no longer with us, but he was a good guy, a good friend of mine. He saw me, and he thought he'd get far enough away from me. He ran a few hundred yards past us, and he literally stopped on this spot. I couldn't give it to him. He literally stopped on my big fish spot and caught like a 7.12 or 7.5 or something at Santee, and it was a tough bite anyway. And when I saw him, I melted because I was going over there next to fish it. And he knew what I did, and he did the same thing, and he just happened to catch one that weighed 7.5. And that was big fish of the day. And that would have put me up into range of everyone and given me a little boost. But it was a tough event for me, but a good event, very successful event. I fished hard, fished clean every day, fell out of the top 5 the last day and finished 6th. And Kevin Worth went on to win that event on my backup spot. So that was my best story.
I believe he is now, obviously everyone knows Kevin Worth is a jockey, but I believe he's a horse dentist
he's a
horse dentist in Kentucky now. I feel like that's gotta be more lucrative than a bass pro. Horse dentist. Wouldn't you say?
Kevin came in and out of the sport, and we've stayed friends, but we built a little bit of a relationship on that one because I stayed off him and he stayed off me.
Mm-hmm.
Both of us appreciated it. We kind of mentioned it in passing, and I didn't think he had the best fish. I thought mine were the best fish, and they probably were the better fish, Matt. I had too much company.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was fishing where everybody saw me. My fish were better, but I had a lot of help.
Anything else you want to get in here, Rick? Like I said, I actually had a list of things I wanted to get into that we haven't gotten into. I'm happy with where we went today. I think that was a well-rounded show. Anything else you want to get in here before I let you go?
Yeah, there's a lot of things going on with BPT and bass right now. We kind of jumped around on that, and we danced around the topic. But, there's a lot of guys in this sport. So I've got somebody working on something, and I think that probably Bass on Tour is probably going to come out with a little bit of a graph on it. And I think we're going to see a dynamic difference in the way you view what's happening in the sport. I see what's happening in the sport as an eventuality. So not everybody can fish forever. I mean, Joe Montana no longer throws a football. And Roger Staubach quit a long time ago, and they cannot compete forever. And if you're not successful, you need to move on. I wasn't successful, and I got to the point where fishing was secondary to work, and I moved on. And so I'm going to dip my toe in for fun this year, but it's more for promotion and fun. But these guys that are coming into this that are worried and frustrated about their careers changing, they're here to catch fish. And if you're not catching fish, then you're probably going to get cold. And eventually, if you're not throwing a football, you're not throwing a baseball, you're going to get cold. I mean, we had a lot of things we were going to talk about today. We talked about a couple of them, just kind of brief topics, but no doubt what's happening in BPT is changing. I'm a little concerned with the and we got to realize BPT is only since 2019, so it's a 5-year program. It's not old. But to give them their lifetime points, I feel like that's a little unfair to the youngsters coming in, because the lifetime points, that detracts from the younger crowd. They got to make it. I think Bass has got a similar platform for filling some of those holes on that side above 70, and that's a good platform to fill above, but the 70 are locked in by their successful points. So I think Bass is a little cleaner on that, but I think definitely it's just a purging of the market, and that's what's going to happen. If you don't win at NASCAR, you're not going to be there. There are so few opportunities for these guys. I mean, you look at the number of golfers that have changed. I mean, Tiger Woods doesn't win anymore. And so you look at all this, and it just changes. And it may be time for change. I think Bass did an amazing job when BPT created. It was really weak, the field, for a couple of years. But they promoted those guys. They stayed. That field's not weak anymore. And these guys coming out, Bobby Lane, and I'm not saying anything bad about Bobby. Bobby's a great angler. But coming back into it on Bass, there's going to be some guys coming out. You look at Jordan Lee, and Jordan's supposedly coming over that side. Jordan's going to have a learning curve. And he doesn't think so, I'm sure.
No, he says he does. He said he did on the show. I had him on, and he was like, man, I'm kind of nervous going back. I don't know. I haven't fished against these guys. And I was like, I mean, I guess it's hard for me to imagine Jordan Lee not just getting on the water and just ho-humming his way to 18 to 20 every day. But he thinks that he said himself on the show last Tuesday night, that he thinks he's going to have an adjustment period, a learning curve over at the Elite Series.
Oh, I think he is. And I did know that, Matt. I knew he said that, but I think, I wish Matt was still fishing. I like Matt Lee,
Mm-hmm.
But Matt's one that got kind of in that position where he had to change his life a little. He's selling real estate in Guntersville area now, so that's good. But Jordan coming out, I think that these kids are that good, and their youth are that good. I mean, look at Jacob. Jacob's obviously that good.
Mm-hmm.
But he's over there winning. This side over here is different. Is there ever emerging? MLF, and we've been involved with MLF, as you know, since the start in 2011 or whenever it was, 2011. And, it started really, MLF started to give the Outdoor Channel. Roger Warner was CEO of the Outdoor Channel. And MLF was started to give the Outdoor Channel their own platform television show for fishing, so they wouldn't lose it. And that's what people don't realize. It was really only about the media when it started. Well, then we go through, fast forward through all this, and we look at what happened in 17, and Irwin's not with us anymore, and 18. And we look at Irwin's not with us anymore. FLW's on the straits. There's a $117 million bankruptcy, supposedly, that's Irwin's estate. And FLW's gone. It's toast, you know. And so you look at this, and maybe it is toast and maybe it isn't. MLF comes in and buys it, which I'm still surprised to this day the court allowed them to buy it. But they did. They bought it off the family. And they bought FLW, which became MLF, which became BPT. And it came in fresh, and then this massive change. But that obviously had to do with Kroenke Media, because what happened was Outdoor Channel changed. They were sold to Sportsman Group, Sportsman Intermedia. Intermedia sold to Kroenke, so you've got 3 ownerships of MLF since it started in 2011. People don't realize that. And so it was quick ownerships, but they did bam, 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 you know. So you had 3 different ownerships of it in that period of time. And MLF's still morphing. I think Chase and the crowd at Bass has just really done a good job to navigate it. And we have supported, and Jim Wilburn's a friend of mine. I like Chase and Chase Anderson and family. Charles, I don't know real well. I met him. But I think the family's done a good job, and I think they've done a great job of transitioning Bass. Chase's grandfather's been involved in Bass for decades. People don't realize that. So, you know, it goes back a lot of depth in the family. So I think they've done a good job navigating it. And I think we're going to see media change. But the big difference in MLF and in Bass is the MLF is media driven, Bass is member driven. And so you have 2 different organizations that have 2 different platforms. And I think that both of them could succeed. I know they're going to try to wrangle that cost next year at BPT, and I'm sure they need to wrangle that cost. I'm sure it's gotten expensive. Mm-hmm. Originally, you know, we were going to try to cover 50 guys and figured out we couldn't cover 50 guys. Then they were going to cover 25 guys, figured out we couldn't really cover 25 guys. And technology's come a long way since we started, but we wound that down to covering 8 guys in the original Cup Series, you know, 8, 8, 8. And that's how that worked. And so we could cover 8, we could cover 12. And so that's kind of where that worked in those original Cups. And that's how the Cups got developed, and developed as a skins game. And now it's turned into its own organization, its own platform. And the biggest thing about the biggest value, I think, to MLF is what Phoenix has signed up in the sponsorship. And they got a couple of years left on their sponsorship. As of December, we're out of our sponsorship agreement. We'll not be back in sponsoring MLF. And Jim's still a friend of mine, Jim Wilburn. I love him to death, but good friend of mine. But with what's happening at MLF, I think that we're going to see a real change going forward, because the meat of that all is the BFL. And the BFL is the meat of the market. It is the most aggressive, hardcore anglers in bulk we have. And what FLW had that gave the most marketing value to MLF is those BFL anglers. And Bass tried to go against that years and years ago with a weekend series, which didn't work. And now they sold that off to another group, and it's different. But no doubt they thought they could go build it. And another industry person thought they could build it, and kind of induced Bass to start that platform. But BFL came off of Redman and what Mike Whitaker and Charlie Evans did. And I fished them in the 80s, and it's really been a solid platform. It's got a lot of longevity behind it, now 40 years old. And I think the BFL platform is where the growth is, and that's really strong for MLF. And then you got Bass over here, and you can talk about the federation, you can talk about everything else. They've got all of the membership, which is 500,000 members, and they're not all tournament guys. They're casual guys. And, you know, we just talked about a Jaguar SDS, and actually just recently I've been kind of looking at the ages of anglers that are buying some of that product, and, you know, they're not tournament guys. They're recreational fishermen. Are they members of Bass? A lot of them are.
Yeah.
But they're recreational guys. They take their wife. The wife is one of the most important aspects. Their grandchildren. Some of them are coaching high school kids that are grandkids. I talked to a gentleman 2 weeks ago that's coaching his grandson who's lost his father. And so him and his uncle, or the grandfather and his son, are coaching the grandson. And so there's a lot of it that are involved that are not really anglers, or trying to support anglers. And we're seeing a lot of high school youth coming out with grandparents, uncles, and just dads. And, of course, a lot of dads. We're seeing even some moms that are high school coaches. So I think the game's changed. When you talk about MLF and bass, and the road I went down, is this purging of this thing a little bit, and that the two organizations are dynamically different, and they can both succeed. There's this pitting against them. They can both succeed if they both have their venues.
It's well said. Anything else?
I don't know. You let me ramble too much, big boy.
No, I didn't. That's good stuff. I have you on to ramble. Here's the thing. I like people who can ramble and they know what they're talking about. They come with it from an analytical and a historical context, and there's not too many guys out there. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was like one of our phone conversations.
I'll send you a picture of a Mackinac M810. I know where one picture
yeah,
is.
I would love to see that.
I can't even find a picture of it anymore, but I know where a picture is, so I'll flick you a picture.
I would be very interested in that. I'm actually filming another show today, and you'll like this. And I'm not sure when it'll air. I kind of wanted to get one in the can. I'm interviewing Britt Myers Jr. Britt Myers kid. He's jumping into the invitationals. This year, and I followed him on social media, believe it or not. And I was like, hey man, I saw you jump I'd love to interview. You've never talked to him before, but another one of the kids following in the dad's footsteps. That seems to be the thing to do these days. It's unbelievable. You talk about, obviously old school with Roland and Scott, but you got the Joneses and you got Rabatis, you got the Robinsons, the Byers, you got all these guys that grew up in a bass boat, the Lanes, from the time they were 8 years old, 3 years old.
Go to the Dowden family, man. Bo Dowden's kids. And I mean, I've known so many. I mean, I've got a picture somewhere of there were 26 father-son teams, I think it was, at Guntersville in the old Invitational days.
Wow.
And Dad and I were front and center in that picture. They put us down front. We were sitting on stools. But there were I think there were 26 of us that were father-son teams. I don't remember the number, but of course Guido and Dion, which Guido was a good friend of mine, Dion's friend. Guys you don't know today: Guy Eaker Jr., Scotty Oliver and his son, Denny and Chad.
Yep.
Denny and
that
Chad.
Was a powerhouse for a number of years. Chad was winning stuff. They both are making classics fishing there. I mean, they had the TVs go. Yeah, that was a big one.
So father and son cruise is not unusual. It's been around for years, but going up. I'll tell you the one I'm waiting on, and at Bass Fishing Hall of Fame, of course, we were there. We got a couple of tables and supported Mike, of course. Mike, he invited us. I'm like, Mike, we're going to be there every year anyway. But no, I'm not missing this one. But anyway, I had Janet sent me a hat, and one of his assistants there, and I called her and said, you screwed up. And said, you didn't get a signature on it. I wanted a hat. And so he sent me a hat, and I didn't get a signature on it. Now I'm going to tell you about the hat. That's the night that I took the hat with me and got it signed. It was a hat that I wanted signed, but I wanted it signed not by Mike Iaconelli. It's a Vegas the Hammer hat, and I wanted Vegas' signature. So the night that Ike was inducted in the Hall of Fame, I had Vegas sign his hat.
I love it.
So someday when I'm gone, I'm sure I'll be gone, I hope Vegas is a star in the sport, and I hope I'm not gone. But the
way he's going and the way the ages are, he's like 5 years away, Rick.
Yeah. The way it is, if he just keeps his nose down. And I'll tell you, Mike and I had this conversation back years ago. And I mean, Mike and I, when he made the decision to go PPT on a Sunday afternoon, and I probably shouldn't share this. But I will. We spent over 2 hours on a Sunday afternoon on the phone, one Sunday afternoon, really just beating up the scenarios. And I never advised Mike on what to do. But the one thing I did tell him then, and it really stunned him when we had the conversation, is that one day he will want to compete, and he will have to look at where Vegas goes because Vegas will want to be there. And that was, of course, now that was 5-6 years ago, and he had never thought about Vegas fishing someday at that level. It
Yeah, I
just
think
hadn't
he's going
hit
to be
him.
there.
It hadn't hit him.
He wins everything in New Jersey. He's got a Torpedo on the back of a little boat, and if Mike's in town, he hops in the tournament with him, and Becky sits in the
Becky
back
does
and
it.
documents it, and he fights him just like Mike, and he does his videos on how he caught him and the lures, and it's fun to watch. It really is. He's got his logo. It's like a V with it's got some elements of Ike's shark mouth on the front of it. But yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, that'll be the next one.
He's going to be, and he's going to be good. Will he make it? Will he go there? He might become a dentist. I can't see that having Ike Nelly.
No, I think he'll be be next.
But
next in line.
I think Vegas is a comer, and I've been watching him. I've been watching a lot of kids, and we've got some announcements this year with a kid we're picking up this year that is coming to us, and he fits us culturally. He fits us in what we do with our belief of building boats and faith and Christ, and he fits us in that area. And we've got one coming to us that I've been following for 6 years, and I'm following these young men young because I think there's a future in them. And the biggest thing is they've got good parents that work with them, and there's high school kids I followed that have made it. Johnny that has Fish the Moment, he didn't go into tournament business, but I met Johnny when he was a pup in Little Rock, Arkansas.
I remember that.
Yeah,
he was hooked up with Triton though. Earl snapped him up when he was about 7 years old and put him in a Triton jersey.
Yeah, well, he wound up just buying one and wound up in one, but he stayed in it for a long time, and I think he's still running one. But Johnny Schultz figured out how to make a living in the sport without being a pro angler. That's the most energizing thing, and I said this last Tuesday at that high school thing, that we've got more young professionals coming in the sport that are not. They're not coming in as anglers. They're coming in like, Brad Rutherford at Pure Fishing over there. And you've got Dustin Elder down here at Pradco. And I'll tell you, a group I like is the Merrill brothers, Tony and Tyler Merrill. And one of them works for Mercury Marine. He now runs a power steering division at Mercury Marine. He's over all the power steering program, which is outboards and multi-engine. And then Tony's working for Rather Outdoors. And we've got so many youth that are coming in this sport out of college and high school that aren't really coming in as anglers. And I think that's energizing, man. That's great stuff. So not even at that level. I had a young man spent time with me last week wanting to know how to become an engineer in the sport. I've got another guy that I met years ago that is an engineer at Malibu Boats, not even here, not even our company. But he's at Malibu, and he started as an intern. He was a young angler coming out of Alabama. He's probably pushing 40 now, and he's been in the business and works as an engineer.
Did you say Tyler Merrill out of Iowa? Is that who you're talking about? Yeah, he was just getting into the college fishing. I'm pretty sure he fished against me and Chip that last year on the Arkansas River. He was like a freshman at Iowa.
Yeah, he's now in charge of power steering, the new steering program, which is an electric power steering program at Mercury Marine.
No joke. Yeah, I fished against that kid back in college. I was just on the way out when he was coming in. You said the name, and I was like, surely that can't be the same one.
He's got a brother named Tony, too.
Okay.
And both of them fished. And like I said, Tony's at Rather Outdoors.
Okay.
So, it's just really energizing to see people come into the sport. Look at Michael Corbichet with Lowrance. Michael came into the sport through college fishing. Now he's fishing NPFL, and he's our OEM rep for Lowrance. No, they don't run our product. They're good guys, do a good job, and it's just really energizing to see them in the sport. Now, Dustin runs our product. His dad has for decades, and Brad Rutherford and his dad both have boats, but they're not really, it's not about the boat. It's about seeing them in the sport and enjoying it and growing it and being a part of it and bringing this thought. The other thing about those that we just discussed is they have an ability to recognize the history. And that's really important that they recognize the history. So many coming in now may not recognize the history, and it's important we keep that.
I think it's hard to have respect if you don't understand the history. You don't have any basis, any guidelines of where things have been. I mean, obviously they're saying, history repeats itself. You have to learn from the past, but also you have to have a respect for that past. And I think both organizations, particularly Bassett, obviously you have Ken Duke who does it. I'm going to get on my soapbox for just a minute before I let you go then. But you go into baseball, and why is a perfect game significant? Why is a no-hitter significant? Because you have a history of what's happened over the past 100 and 150 years, and you have guys like Tim Kershkin, and you have the Baseball Hall of Fame that can put that into perspective when you have guys who have Cy Young years and go on pitching streaks and hitting streaks. It makes you understand it and appreciate it. And then you also have the history of when things go horribly wrong. And if you don't have people that understand why that went and where that went, then you're going to repeat those same mistakes over and over again. And you got a lot of 18 to 22-year-olds in here. And the one thing that, and you preach on it and Hank preached on it, is the importance of the youth and getting involved. I think there should be a mandatory history lesson that comes with fishing tournaments at the high school level, instead of it's about wearing the jersey and it's about getting sponsors and getting the trophies. I think you should have an understanding of what came before you, kind of the history of how all this thing works. It just gives you a better appreciation. And then I think you also will have a lot less issues on the water as far as respect on the water, how you're supposed to fish, because you have a respect and an understanding for the sport. I was lucky that I got in it when I was 13 years old, and that I had Harold Allen that taught me up in it, and I feel like I have that. What are we holding up there, Rick?
That is a WCF placard that's laminated from the original WCFs, which was the boat racing that Bassmaster did,
Mm-hmm. That was the World Championship.
All the signatures of the guys that fished it at the time. But, today I think that at the elite level, and that's a piece of archive history, And so at the elite level, I think it's important that I think they should actually put some type of a incoming history lesson on them. And then back years ago, there was an amount of history that I'm going to talk out of school a minute. That was lost, Matt, on the tail of the ESPN era.
Mm-hmm.
And, Bass at one time had produced, if you won a tournament at Bassmaster, they produced a plaque or trophy like yours and put your picture up in the office that week. And so there was a duplicate for every trophy. Most people don't even know that.
Yeah, I had no clue.
There was a duplicate for every trophy. Some of those got kept, but some of them didn't. And so there was a picture of you at the event in your boat, winning the tournament, that went in the Bassmaster office when you walked into the Bassmaster offices in the back. And that trophy was sitting right there every time. And every time they got a winner, they rotated it. And the history of the sport was important then. Somewhere in the ESPN era, that changed a little bit. And I think that's a big thing that Chase's family has brought in, is the history of the sport's important to them. And I think it's important we keep the history of the sport focal. And that doesn't mean talk about it. That means live it, be it. So I think that it'd be really good for incoming anglers to have a lesson on the history of the sport. And I really appreciate what Terry and Battisti and that group's doing.
Yep.
With the Bass Fishing Archive. I really appreciate Terry a lot with the Bass Fishing Archive. If you haven't looked it up, Bass Fishing Archive is the place, the history of the sport, and it's the only place that's really working on the history of sport.
All right, Rick. I greatly appreciate the time that you took today. Always enjoy it. Hold on, I gotta get X out of here before we close it out. So I will talk to you soon. I'm excited to get in the new Puma.
New STS coming your way.
Very, very excited. I've jumped into a couple of them. I was in John's and a couple of my other buddies, and I've been like, hey, can I rip this sucker around? And I'll have to relearn a couple little things because it drives a little differently, but I'm really excited to. Haven't talked to anybody who isn't absolutely enthralled with it and absolutely loves it. So
now most guys like it and they enjoy it. Personally, my choice is still an Era.
I know you've always been an Era guy since the moment I've known you. You've always been like, hey, I know it might not be the boat for you, but for me, it's what if I had a day on the water, I'm running an Era.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. I'm going to run a Puma SDS this year. So I've got a new Puma SDS in the pipeline, and it's going to have too many graphs and too much equipment and way too much, and that's part of it.
Yeah. Ahead is the day and age. All right, Rick, take care. Have a good afternoon.
Thanks a lot, Matt. Thanks for having me.
All right, see ya. All right, that is the one and only Rick Pierce. We're going to take our final break of the show. When we come back, I kind of spilled the beans on what the rest of the week will be like, but BTL on a Monday. Man, we got 2 hours with Rick Pierce. Can't ask for much more than that. We'll be back right after.
Great thing about the new Sensation soft plastics from Big Bite Baits, heavily scented, super soft, buoyant, comes in 7 great new shapes. I've got a couple of them of my signature series, the cliffhanger worm and the ramtail craw. Great for a flipping jig, football jig, swim jig, all that. Several other great shapes. Really excited about it. We've worked over the last year, catches fish all over the country, and I think it's going to catch fish for people everywhere you try it.
The Spro Little John crankbait has been around for almost 15 years, and it is one of my go-to crankbaits whenever I need a fish in the boat, so you can never have enough new colors. That's why Spro's coming out with a handful of new colors, including Pearl Shad, which has this bleached out white look, but it's got this pearlescent, really pretty. We've got Copper Shad, which looks amazing in the water. It's got that purple flake on the back, really pops in the water. And then if you want some real pop, we've got Sparkle Shad, nothing but sparkles all over this thing. And then last but not least, we've got the Matte Sexy Shad, just a really different looking color for a crankbait. So you want to give them a little different look, that Matte Sexy Shad is definitely the one to go with. All these colors are available in the original Little John and the MD.
Shoreline Boat and RV, dock rash, storm damage, collision repair, that deep scratch or gouge from trying to access that secret creek. Shoreline Boat and RV can get your prized possession back in mint condition and looking good on the water, fast. All repairs are done in-house, so they're able to get your boat or RV back to brand new, quickly. All Shoreline's work comes with a rock-solid warranty. Find out more at shorelineboatandrv.com. Kansas City, Austin, and Tulsa.
I'm the kind of guy that never leaves the house without a pocket knife, and Gamakatsu's come out with the EDC series of knives. EDC stands for Everyday Carry, so whether you're on the water or off, you can always have it with you. The best thing about it to me is that assisted open feature. With this D2 blade, you've got it right here at your fingertips, so if you can't find your scissors, you need to cut a knot, you need to cut your braid, you've always got it. Make sure you check it out. Never leave home without your Gamakatsu EDC knife.
Born in Japan, using technology, innovation, and precision, Sunline produces the widest selection of fishing lines at the most technologically advanced line factory in the world. Manufactured at the strictest tolerances to produce victories at the highest levels of tournament bass fishing. From household names like Christie, Swindle, and Cruz, to young guns like Cook, Logan, New, and Welcher, they all trust Sunline to take them to the top of the leaderboard. Choose the line that will give you the strength to guarantee your confidence. Sunline.
All right, we're back wrapping things up on a Monday after an hour and a half conversation, a little longer than that, with Rick Pierce. Covered a bunch of different topics, and one of the things we all know, he has been there and he has done that. Very interesting perspective. Like to talk to Rick. Do want to point out, if you want more content, head over to Dave Mercer's channel, Facts of Fishing. We do this thing called the Cull every week. I know some of you guys have caught on to it. We're like 2 years in. We literally just do it because we enjoy it. And it's kind of like an argumentative style show. It's only like 10, 12 minutes long. Anyway, this week's topic is that the best lure, bass fishing lure of all time, is the spoon. I firmly believe it. Dave does not firmly believe it. So we argue that for 15 minutes. So go over and give that a like. Filming some shows for the holiday weekend coming up tomorrow. We're going to stay in depth with guys. We got Scott Palmer from the Bass Tank, who's going to come in and talk about the Bass Tank Academy. Also going to talk about what to do with your units during the wintertime, as far as saving waypoints, cleaning it out, making sure you don't lose anything. You're transferring stuff from boat to boat, removing electronics from boats, putting it on new boats, all sorts of little stuff that makes a big difference kind of in that November through February timeframe when most of the guys are either transitioning or getting ready for a new year. And then he's also going to talk about the Bass Tank Academy. I mentioned I'm shooting a show in a couple minutes here with Britt Myers Jr. And then on Wednesday, we have the winners of the high school and college chaos on. And then we will also catch up with the Cajun Baby, Cliff Crochet. It's been a while since we've had the Cajun Baby on, back on the BPT for another year. All right, that is all we got for a Monday. Big thanks to Rick Pierce. Big thanks to all the listeners. Good viewership. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. It means a lot. You guys did great. A lot more feedback, and greatly appreciated. All right, tomorrow, Scott Palmer in studio. We'll talk to everybody then. Later.